In today's session, we are going to cover requirement elicitation. So requirement elicitation is the very initial stage wherein the BA starts eliciting the requirement. Eliciting the requirement means start exploring a particular requirement for a particular project. So in this process, they would identify different categories of requirement, different phases of elicitation, then how they should collaborate and manage the requirement in a long run after they have elicited the requirement, and eventually how they should go about creating documentation like your software requirement specification and business requirement documentation. And we would also cover some of the um, underlying techniques like we covered in our last session. So we would first identify the core elements of business analysis. Then we would identify needs for requirement elicitation. We would understand requirement elicitation process. We would understand what are requirement attributes and what are requirement properties. After that, we would understand what and how to manage the requirements. Then how requirements are originated, what are the categories that are typically there in requirements elicitation when you come across a particular project, what are the different categories of requirement that you would see. After that, we would see what are the typical phases in requirement elicitation process, how do we go about writing the requirements, and we would also see a template of software requirement specification. We would understand its characteristics and contents, and this would also be your assignment for today for preparing a requirement specification document basis on the project work that I have given. And at the end, we would understand what are the underlying techniques for requirement elicitation. So before beginning, essentially, with the requirement elicitation process, we would first understand the core elements of business analysis. So we would go with a simple example. So whenever you start your day, you start with a cup of tea. So your cup of tea is essentially a requirement. Then you have certain inputs, like in the process of making a tea, you need certain ingredients. So that are nothing but your inputs for that particular requirement. And then there are certain process like how you should go about making that particular tea, and eventually you get a output towards the end. So whenever you are working in a particular project, you need to first understand what is the requirement, what are the inputs that are needed in order to complete that particular requirement, what is the process of executing that particular requirement, and what is the final output you are expecting out of that requirement. Now, right from starting, from gathering the inputs to the requirement to the output of the requirement, there is always an efforts that is associated. So that is nothing but your preparation time in this particular tea making process. Now coming to the other part, like stakeholder, who needs that cup of tea? Like in a particular family, your dad, your mom, your son needs that particular cup of tea. So that in that case, all three are your stakeholders. So they are the need initiators. Who has the need of this cup of tea? So we need to understand from a stakeholder perspective who is asking that particular requirement, whether it's a business sponsor, whether it's a um, business person, whether it's an operation person, or whether it's a project manager. Who is that particular stakeholder? After that, in this case, mom is related to your business analyst, who essentially analyzes and develop the initial requirement for that particular tea making process, like the inputs and output. And eventually we deliver the cup of tea to everyone. Whoever has demanded for that requirement, we do the delivery of that particular requirement. So in essentially in a requirement management or business analysis world, we would often encounter these terms: inputs, processes, outputs, efforts, stakeholders, and their requirements. So we would often encounter these terms only as a business analyst when we are going for initial requirement elicitation process. Now, before starting the requirement elicitation process, we need to first understand what is the need. So need analysis is one of the technique which is used in requirement elicitation process, which gives us understanding about what is the requirement, like whether it's a change request, whether it's a modification to an existing design, or whether it's an altogether new product development. What is the need and what is the justification in and around that particular requirement, why that requirement is needed at the first place. So we would first understand the need. Now, why we need to understand the need before starting the requirement elicitation process? The reason is, if we don't understand the need of that particular requirement or that particular project, we won't be able to analyze the possible permutation and combination around the scenarios, the business scenarios that project would encounter or that particular system would encounter. For example, if you are making a payment to a particular online store or online website, your need is to purchase a particular product, and that online website's need is to gather payment and do the delivery of the final product to you. So they have different needs. So online portal is your system who would be having a business sponsor associated to it. That is business sponsor's need. You want to purchase a product, you are the user of that particular system, so that is your user specific need. Now, similarly, there would be some vendors associated in that online portal who would typically be providing supplies to that online portal, like stocking, restocking of the inventories in that particular online portal. So that stocking and restocking are the need of the vendors who would be interacting with that online portal. So essentially, whenever a system is built, the needs differ around the type of user who is interacting with the system. It could be a vendor, it could be a supplier, it could be an end user, it could be a finance user, it could be your domain user, regulatory user, or it could be your business sponsor as well. So depend on the context, depend on the situation, the need varies across users who would be interacting with the system. In addition to that, at the top of it, your entire system would be having a need, like what is the value the system is delivering to the end customer or to these specific category of people. Now essentially projects are or the customers needs are categorized in three ways, like user requested or client requested, or modification to an existing design, or generation of a new product. So new product is like you are building a product from scratch, there was no other product available at that point of time with that particular business sponsor. Now modification of an existing design is like the system was already there, but the business sponsor want to upgrade that system to a newer version. So that is another category of need. Then there is client request. So client request is like if you want to add some additional feature or any exclusive feature to that particular application, then those are your client specific need. Now client specific need would be different for different category of user. They won't be same for everyone. Any questions, anyone? Okay. Now, what is requirement elicitation at the first place? So it's a practice of researching and discovering the requirements of a system from users, customers, and other stakeholders. So whenever we start requirement elicitation, we tend to conduct multiple interviews, focus group session, workshops, JAD session. We apply multiple interviewing techniques and requirement gathering techniques. So those techniques at the end would ultimately give us some sort of requirement which are not in a confirmed state. It would always be in an unconfirmed state. So the moment we start with the other phase, that is requirement gathering phase, that is a phase wherein you get your requirements confirmed. Now what's the meaning of unconfirmed and confirmed? Unconfirmed is like you have written the requirement at a high level or probably at a deeper level, but it is not yet approved by your business sponsor or the outsourcing company. And confirmed requirement is like you are confident about, you have gathered enough information around that particular requirement, you go ahead to the business and get it confirmed from the business. So essentially, people may ask you what's the difference between requirement elicitation and requirement gathering, and people often say that both are same phase, but no, they are not same phase, they are different phase. Requirement elicitation is like whenever you start your initial brainstorming around a particular requirement, wherein you start bit by bit about gathering the requirement, but bit by bit about a particular requirement. But requirement gathering is a phase wherein you tend to confirm those requirements and do a well documentation of that requirement with proper sign off from the appropriate stakeholder or the business sponsor. In a typical project, your requirement elicitation activities come first, followed by your requirement gathering always. Whether it's a product development project, whether it's a legacy system, whatever may be the nature of the project, requirement elicitation would always come first, followed by your requirement gathering. Now, what are requirement at a high level? So it refers to any thing or any condition which is as per the demand of a particular user. So going by definition, requirement what refer to what is necessary. So a requirement is some quality or performance demands of a person in accordance with the needs. Like I told you, every person would be having a different need. So need is essentially the starting point which originates your concrete requirement. So a business user would be having a different need. So the requirement mapped with a business user's need would be called as business requirement. A domain user would be having a different need. So requirement originating from domain needs would be your domain specific requirement. Then there would be a functional set of requirement. So functional set of need would be giving those set of requirement, the functional requirement. Similarly, non-functional requirement. Irrespective of whatever category of requirement you deal with, there would always be a need associated to it. Without need, there won't be any requirement in practice. So essentially we have a project requirement. So these are essentially the condition or task that you need to meet with your requirements that you have written. For example, if you see there is a requirement of login. So you would be having a requirement ID, your requirement name and a description like user must be able to register or log in from all pages. So that would always lie where at the header section of your website. It cannot be at the footer section or at the middle section of the website. So you have to categorize the requirement as header section of the requirement. Now if we see the another requirement like login payment, so the description is registration for the payment and it would again be at the header section of the payment. And if you want to add additional note like when a user clicks on register, she will be redirected to registration form with payment option like Visa, MasterCard, Amex, PayPal. So this way you could put your requirements for the entire projects in a tabular fashion. Now how do you go about identifying what to put in what fashion? So for that we have your requirement attributes and requirement properties. Now what are requirement attributes? So requirement attributes is specific characteristics that each attribute has in common. Like every requirement would be having a unique ID, on what date that requirement was created, what is the current version of the requirement, who is the author of the requirement, who is this requirement is assigned to, what is the status of the requirement or the priority, complexity, difficulty or due date. Anything which is generic to all the requirements would be termed as requirement attributes. So essentially if you see a system like Jira, so in this system, if you let's say we create a particular requirement. Just hang on, I'm sorry. So when you are creating a particular requirement in a typical environment, so here you see the project, the issue type, the summary, then description, then your priority, fixed version, attachment, linked issues, assignee, epic link, sprint. So these are nothing but your requirement attributes, okay, which are there. Now what are requirement properties? So any data that you enter into this particular blocks or in this particular section, they are called as requirement properties. Like what type of requirement it is or what the requirement would have, those would be considered and together derived as the property of the requirement. If you see the properties or characteristics of a particular requirement. There are certain characteristics or properties that you need to follow in a particular SDLC methodology when you are writing a requirement. Like the requirement has to be complete. You cannot write an incomplete requirement or any ambiguous requirement. Then the requirement has to be accurate, like what the requirement is generally, what value that requirement is delivering. It has to be very accurate. Again, it shouldn't be ambiguous. Next, it should be testable. So whatever requirement you are writing, you have to clearly mention the acceptance criteria around that particular requirement. What are the benchmark basis on which this requirement would be assessed? So the requirement has to be testable by the testing team. Then the requirement should be feasible. Feasible as in you cannot go about writing a requirement like the system should be user friendly. Now user friendly is a vague word. You have to detail out the requirement like what is user friendliness, what's the perception of user friendliness in the minds of business stakeholders. So you have to clearly mention it out. So that may fall under your accuracy and feasibility, like whatever requirement is doable by the development team. Then the requirement which are necessary as in I told you there are certain ways in which you could prioritize the requirement. So you have to specify like these are the necessary set of requirements that you need to complete. Then there would be certain requirement which may not be necessary at that point of time. So you could give them a second priority or third priority basis on the what I would say conclusion of everyone and agreement of everyone in that particular project. Next, the requirement shouldn't be ambiguous. All the requirement has to be straight and straightforward and clear. If you say the page should load quickly, now quickly doesn't mean anything. You could specify it in this way: the page should load within 5 seconds or 10 seconds. So that is an unambiguous requirement. Quickly or user friendly, fast, slow, you need to avoid these words when you are writing a particular requirement. Then the requirement has to be prioritized. Like we saw, there would be certain degree of ranking associated with every requirement. You have to follow that degree of ranking, like which are the high priority requirement, which are the low priority requirement, and which are the medium priority requirement. So any question around requirement attributes and requirement properties, anyone?
So, Sunil, when we are writing the requirements, do we need to distinguish as the functional as well as the non-functional, or this is the initial draft that we'll be giving?
That part I will come in a while, how the
Okay,
requirements are categorized.
okay. Thank
Next part is your requirement management. Now that you have initiated and populated all the requirements, you have to manage those requirements. Like we have different requirement management tools like Visual Studio Team Foundation Server, then we have Jira, then we have IBM Rational. So all of these tools have a mechanism through which you could manage a requirement. Now what is managing a requirement? Managing a requirement is like you could check the status of the requirement, like there is certain status: in progress, done, to do requirement, what the requirement is, what is the story point, or which sprint that particular requirement is tagged to, what is the priority of that requirement, who has reported this particular requirement or bug or error or issue for that matter. You should be able to manage this requirement and establish a traceability around that requirement. So that is what it talks about. Whatever requirements you are writing, you should be able to manage that particular requirement. Now, requirement elicitation process would initiate n number of requirements, maybe 100 requirements, 200 requirements, 300 requirements. But the moment when we reach to the requirement gathering phase, it would be double or triple in number. So since we have so many set of requirements, maybe 1000 or 2000 requirements, we need a tool to manage that particular requirement. So these things would help us in managing that particular requirement. Now there are different concepts around managing the requirement like baselining, versioning, then tracing the requirement, linking the requirement. That part I would cover when I would cover requirements lifecycle management session. So as of now, this is how we would be managing the requirement. Now there are certain phases how you would be managing the requirement. Like you would first define the requirements baseline. Baseline is like when you start writing the very first requirement around a functionality. For example, you write a requirement, the user should be able to um, register to a particular website. This is a baseline requirement. After certain point of time, the business user should say that, okay, your regular registration is fine via your email address or your cell phone number. Now we want Google authentication as well. So that would be your version requirement. So your baseline requirement is like your plain requirement wherein you would be having a username, password, and a cell phone number for registering to a particular website. Your version requirement, that is 1.1, would be Google authentication. You should be able to register to a particular website via Google. Your third version requirement 1.2 could be Facebook authentication. Similarly, the number of integration you are increasing with the social media handles or the social media channels, the versioning of the requirement would go in an incremental fashion. Now, why this requirement would be in incremental fashion? Why not as a new requirement? The reason is that the benefit or the value this requirement is giving you, or the output this requirement is giving you, is essentially the same thing. That is, the user is successfully able to register to a particular website. So the value is registration, but the registration channels are different. Your plain email address and cell phone number, your Google authentication, your Facebook authentication, but ultimately they contribute to one single value, that is registration. That's the reason why you go on versioning the requirement or incrementing the requirement rather than taking it up as a new requirement. Then your link requirements to their sources, test cases, implementation code, and business objectives. So whenever you are writing a requirement, since there would be multiple requirements at the same time, 1500 or 2000 requirement for a given project, you should be able to link that particular requirement in a perfect manner, which should be again linked to the test cases, the codes, the business objective. Now this linking part I would cover in requirement lifecycle management, wherein I would explain you what is requirement traceability matrix with an example. So as of now, we need to keep it in mind that we need to link the requirement. Then we have to evaluate proposed changes to the requirement. Like I gave you an example of this registration page. So what are the proposed changes that may occur to a particular requirement? We need to evaluate that as well. Since we are in requirement elicitation phase, the requirements are not yet confirmed. So we still have the scope to evaluate the proposed changes in and around a particular requirement. After that, we approve and incorporate requirement changes. Once that is done, we can incorporate the requirement changes. Now here onward, your requirement gathering phase starts. These two things. Now since it's a requirement management, what I would say tool, it would be having a collaboration of requirement elicitation results and requirement gathering results together. So first three are your outcome of requirement elicitation, and bottom two are your outcome of requirements gathering. Together, they are managed in a requirement management tool like TFS, Jira, or IBM Rational. So there are many tools, free, open source, or paid version. There are many tools. Any questions so far, anyone? Okay. Now, how are requirements originated? So we have different entities in a particular project. Like we have a system that needs to be built in. Then we would be having a certain set of users who would be using the end system. Then there would be a certain set of internal people, often referred to as stakeholder, who would be giving their requirements. Then there would be a certain processes through which we would be taking the requirement or the system would be built. Those are called as business requirements. And then there would be certain regulatory requirements. So regulatory norm are something that is at a highest level. So regulatory requirement, no one can deny. You have to implement it. Otherwise, your system would be termed as non-compliant. So regulatory requirement is a mandate requirement that you have to have in your particular project. You cannot skip that particular requirement. User requirement you can skip to a certain extent by your prioritization technique. System requirement, again, it can be prioritized. Your technology requirement can be prioritized, essentially given by your technical team, like your development team or the solution architect or your solution designer team, whatever the team is, technical team is. So essentially in a particular project, we have these 6 things that would originate a requirement: the system, the user, the technology people, the regulator, the business, and the stakeholders who would be associated with the particular project. Now, business is like your day-to-day transaction that happens in a particular business. Like in your finance domain, what are the day-to-day operation that happens in a particular business? What is the flow of a particular business? That would give your business requirement.
Hello.
Yeah.
So, who takes the decision for like skipping the requirement?
See, it is not about taking a decision. Regulatory requirement is something that you have to abide to. That is universal. You cannot skip it. But rest all requirement, if you want to have a feature which is good to have. So those good to have feature can be implemented, cannot be implemented. So it's a collective decision that is taken by your entire team who are there in a particular project.
Okay, and like you said that there will be some requirements which have low priority, high, and medium. So,
Mhm.
BA decides that, or its decision is made by the entire team. BA Scrum Master?
No, BA would essentially write the requirements. Whenever he is writing the requirement in elicitation or gathering process, he won't see what is the highest priority or what is the lowest priority. Priority would be set to a requirement when it comes to development, because development essentially happens in typical cycles. So in the very first cycle, what are the set of features the business is demanding for? So business is essentially the people who would be deciding what is more valuable to them or what should be prioritized at a higher level.
Okay. So while the priority is set in the development cycle,
Mhm.
uh, the IT team will definitely be involved. Does BA also play a role in that? Like this requirement should be like prioritized.
Yes, after the requirement has been approved by the business stakeholders, the BA has to officially give a requirements walkthrough to the development team and the QA team. So before giving a walkthrough to the development team or the QA team, the prioritization is essentially done by your technical lead from a development team side or the solution architect or whoever is at a higher level from the development team standpoint. So they would essentially say that what is the effort that is needed to implement this particular requirement. So basis on that effort categorization, they would have a discussion with the business that these are the 2000 requirements that we have written as a business analyst. What do you think should be prioritized first? Because the development cycle would be a time box cycle. There would be 200 hours or 300 hours assigned to a typical sprint cycle in a particular project. So you cannot take up too much requirement or you cannot take up very less requirement. So you have to maintain a balance. So business would decide what all set of requirements they need at the first and rest followed in different cycles.
Okay.
Okay. So moving on, we have certain requirement categories. Now, whenever we are,
Sunny,
yeah,
can you give an example of, can you go to the slide previous system and technology? What's the difference
so system is like what is the behavior after you have created that particular system, how the system would behave. If you are saying it's an finance project, how the system would behave in a finance domain context, like it should be having, to give you an example, Okay, so you have entered an incorrect password in a particular system. So system is not allowing you to log in. So not allowing to log in is a system requirement. You could reset the password. So system is has set a threshold that it has to be a combination of alphanumeric characters. So alphanumeric characters requirement is a system requirement. Now technology requirement is like in what way the requirements would be implemented, especially the architectural consideration, like how your requirement would be integrating with other systems, or what is the architecture you follow, whether the application would be hosted on a cloud-based system, sorry, cloud-based server, or it would be a self-hosted application. Those would essentially come under technology requirements.
Thank you.
Now coming to requirements categorization. So we have certain categorization in terms of requirement. So very first categorization is your functional requirement. You cannot have any project in today's IT landscape without functional requirement. Every project would be having functional requirement. Now essentially the functional requirement has these components in it: the business rules, the transactions, the administrative function, the authentication, the authorization level, audit tracking, external interface, certification requirement, reporting requirement, historical data, legal or regulatory requirement, anything that is functional in nature. Now, to give you an example of business rules. So let's say you are logging into a banking application and you are making a transaction of let's say $5,000 in a particular day. Now, after that, the system locks you or restricts you to do further transaction within that particular day. So why the system locks you? Because that's a business rule enforced over there. After you have completed $5,000 in transaction, you have to wait till the next day starts until you make the newer transaction. So that's a business rule. Similarly, another example of business rule could be like you are what I would say, you are resetting a password. So when you are resetting a particular password and you are entering the password which you have entered in your last three transactions. So the system prompts you that you cannot keep your password same as you have entered in the last three transactions. So that is again a business rule. Or a business rule can also be like that you cannot transfer funds outside of United States as per their regulatory norm. So that's a collaboration of business rule and regulatory requirement. So regulatory requirement is like you cannot transfer funds outside the system, outside your country, and business rule would be the system restricting you from transferring the amount to another country. Or there could be requirement that you cannot accept payment in different currency within United States. So that could also be a business rule. So anything that has a business justification would be termed as business rule. Essentially, in a particular project, all the business rules are mapped under functional requirement. Then we have transaction correction, adjustment, and cancellation. So again, it depends on the nature of the project. Like in a finance domain, the transaction would be different. In insurance domain, the transaction would be different. In your supply chain and retail domain, the transaction would be different. Now, to give you an example of transaction requirement in supply and retail domain, whenever you are purchasing a product in Amazon, you should see some statuses changing with respect to your order, like order placed, order packed, order shipped, order out for delivery, and order delivered. So essentially, these stages are referred to as transaction in a typical functional context. Similarly, in insurance, there are transactions like quotation or issuance of policy, then endorsement of a policy, renewal of a policy, or rewrite of a policy, or cancellation of a policy. So those are transactions in a insurance context. Same thing happens in your finance domain as well. So we have to capture all the transaction related aspects in a functional requirement. Then we have administrative functions. Now administrative function is like you cannot give same access to all users in a particular system. Some would be having higher privileges, some would be having lower privileges whether they could read, write particular area. I mean, read, write means view a particular dashboard in a particular system, or they could edit a particular section in a particular system. So all those things are mapped in your administrative section. Like, depending on the user's role, what all areas within the application he could visit, and what are his permission or privileges assigned to that particular role. Then you have authentication requirement, like how the system would authenticate, whether it would be if there are multiple system or it's an internet portal, if there is a single sign-on mechanism implemented over there. Then there would be your authorization level, like who is authorized to do what all activities within a system. Then there would be some audit tracking. External interfaces, like if any other system, outside system, is interacting with your system, like in Amazon's case, the PayPal system is different through which they make payment. The Visa system is different through which they make payment. So Visa, MasterCard, PayPal are external interfaces to Amazon system. Then you have certification requirement. Essentially, it happens in a networking context. They have certain protocols or certain standards to follow. Are they following those particular certification requirements for that particular project? Those are also part of your functional requirement. Now, the other category of requirement is non-functional requirement. So non-functional requirement is more about the uh, behavior of a particular system. Behavior as in, if there are multiple users logged into a particular system at the same time, multiple concurrent users, how the system should perform. So are there enough servers available when multiple users are accessing that particular system, so that the system is not performing slow or not getting slowed down? So performance requirement would take care of it. Same thing happens for scalability requirement, whether the system is scaled enough to handle so much requirement. So much requirement as in so much server load. Like let's say in United States, you have 50,000 users, and in UK you have 40,000 users. So still there is 10,000 users less in UK. So are you able to balance the particular requirement, like distribute the request from United States to UK servers or not? So that is something your scalability would take care of when it comes to non-functional requirement. Then there would be capacity requirement, the system uptime requirement, like within a day there would be 15 minutes downtime to in order to commit all the transaction that has happened throughout the day. So those would be your system availability requirement, like in a particular day, what is the number of hours the system would be available. Now essentially, when you interact with a particular system, you tend to interact it with that particular system during daytime. So the system maintenance activities are done during the night time, so that the system is available for end user during the daytime, or the maintenance activities are conducted during the weekend as well, so that the system is available to the user during the other hours which are feasible for them to work on. Similarly, we have recoverability, maintainability, serviceability, security, environment, data integrity, usability, and interoperability requirement. Now, what is the difference between functional requirement and non-functional requirement? So, functional requirement would essentially come from the business side, and non-functional requirement would essentially come from the technical people side. So, as a business analyst, you have to gather both the category of requirement by collaborating with these two category of people, both the business people and then the technical people. Any questions in functional and non-functional requirement, anyone? Okay. Then we move on to transitional requirement. There is a third category of requirement called as transitional requirement. Now, transitional requirement is like to facilitate transition from the current state to the desired future state, but that will not be needed once the transition is complete. Now, this requirement doesn't stay for throughout the project life cycle. Unlike your functional and non-functional requirement, which are there in the project throughout the project lifecycle until the project is completed and delivered to the customer. Transitional requirement, the case is different. They would be there for a specific period of time for a particular project. After that, those requirements would no longer be needed. Now, what are the typical scenario wherein you would be using transitional requirement? So let's say you are migrating from a legacy system to a modern system or a new system. In that case, the migration requirement like the server requirement or the software suite installation requirement, those would come under transitional requirement. So once the system is migrated, you would no longer be needing those requirements. Essentially, the infrastructure related requirement can fall under your transitional requirement. Then we have another category of requirement called as implicit requirement. So these requirements are part of your testing team essentially. So whenever you are writing your requirement from a business analysis perspective, you tend to capture the requirement from a business perspective. Okay, you tend to capture all the positive scenarios, but there are certain hidden aspects to a particular requirement. Like if the thing doesn't work this way, then what should be the behavior of the system? So those hidden aspects are captured in implicit requirement. Implicit requirements are essentially not written by a business analyst, but or not given by the business stakeholder, but sometimes it has to be assumed based on your domain expertise. Like for example, if I say that in a typical insurance project, what happens is like we have a requirement like okay, mm, the requirement of implicit would be, just give me a moment, let me think. Okay, so you have requirement like in an insurance policy that a user comes to a particular agent and he gives all his demographic information. After that, he goes to the insurance company and he gives all the details whatever user has given to him. And the insurance company they validate the user details and they issue a particular policy to that particular insurance. Okay, now after that insurance is issued, they send physical copies of document to that particular user. Now what happened in this meantime, let's say the user has completed 1 year of policy and his address is same over there throughout this 1 year. Now after 1 year, during the time of renewal, the insured pays the renewal fees, but at this point of time he has shifted to another location. Now what happens, the insurance company again resends the document, the renewal documents of the insurance policy to the insurance address, but the person who has purchased the insurance, he is not available at that particular address. He has moved to a new address. Now what would happen at this point of time? So essentially the US Postal Code Department, they have an option with them. If they have a new address in their database pertaining to that particular user, they would contact that particular insurance company. Wait, let me complete. They would contact that particular insurance company, and if the insurance company gives them a clear indication that okay, you could send this documents to the newer address, then they should I mean the US Postal Code Department, they would resend that particular document or redirect that particular document from old address to new address. Now this particular functionality is called as bounce mail functionality in insurance. Now a BA, when he writes a requirement, he essentially writes the requirement like you have to send physical copy of document to the insured or to the person who has purchased the insurance. He never writes the requirement if there is a bounce happened in his old address, what should be the process. So those requirements can be considered as implicit requirement. No one would tell you, but you have to assume and validate it with the business user. Yes, please go on with your question.
Yeah, actually, there were some disturbances while you were speaking. So, can you explain again with a short example?
Okay, so short example would be uh, let's say you have a very simple example. So let's say you have a login screen. So login screen is something that is very common to every website. So as a business analyst, he would be writing your login screen requirement. Now after that, forget password, he has written the requirement. Now he should also be having something functionality like now forget password is essentially your reset password. Now let's say he sets his forget password functionality as whenever he enters a valid mobile number, he should be receiving an one-time password on his cell phone. Now, the user or the business analyst, he writes the requirement like the system should be having a requirement wherein the user should be able to reset his password via cell phone. He wrote the requirement like this way. Now, how the requirement would work essentially. So that is the implicit part of that requirement. Like whenever the user enters a cell phone, a one-time password would be generated. Again, the user has to enter that one-time password received on his cell phone number in the web portal or the system. Then only the user would be authenticated and validated. So the OTP part is your implicit requirement in that particular case, wherein you don't have a clear indication, you just give what is expectation, like the user should be able to reset his password via his cell phone. This is my explicit requirement. But after you have entered the cell phone and receive a one-time password, that is your implicit requirement.
Okay, got it.
So, Sunil, since you mentioned the implicit requirements will not be captured by BA, will it be a part of the test strategy document that the
Yes.
QA team will be capturing later?
Yes, essentially the
Okay.
test cases the QA team would be writing, they would be taking care of the implicit requirement,
And then it will be discussed with the entire team, which includes the BA, PM, and the users and all.
excluding PM. PM has no
So
role
that
to
the
play over here.
okay, okay,
Okay.
thank you.
The fifth category of requirement is explicit requirement. It would be straightforward requirement, like in general perspective, whenever we are writing a functional requirement, those are categorized as explicit requirement. So in order to validate those requirements, we would be having the necessary acceptance and evaluation criteria needed for that particular requirement. So explicit requirements are pretty straightforward in nature. Now then there is a sixth category of requirement called as latent requirement. So they represent the behavior that user do not expect based on their previous experience, but which will make them like the software more. So the requirements are influenced by the user experience and user interface. So whenever you are accessing a particular system like Facebook or LinkedIn, so every 3 years they go on changing the user experience of that particular website or that particular networking site. So what are they doing essentially? They are working on the latent requirement, that is your user experience and user interface requirement. They change the user interface altogether. They shuffle the options here and there. Those requirements would be part of your latent category of requirements. Whenever you are changing the look and feel of a particular system. Next category of requirement are solution requirement. Now both functional and non-functional requirement are together called as solution requirement, which would meet the solution needs of a particular system. Then we have a business requirement. So business requirement is a high level statement that describe what is required from a business perspective. So what is the value that we are deriving? Now functional requirement are a subset of business requirement. So functional requirement would thereon go a level deeper after the business requirements are captured. What are the business expectations? Now business expectation would give rise to your functional requirements. So business requirements are essentially documented in a higher level document like your business requirement document or BRDs. And your functional requirements are essentially part of your software requirement specification, the document which is a subset of BRD. Then we have stakeholder requirement. So stakeholder are essentially the people who are interacting with that particular system. Like in an retail context, it could be vendor, it could be supplier, it could be procurement head, it could be global sales head or a finance head. So those are stakeholders. So they would be having their specific needs when you are writing, I mean, specific needs which they would give you when you are writing the requirements. The next category of requirement is your domain requirements. So whenever you are writing your domain specific requirement in and around a particular domain, there are certain rules that you need to capture, the business rules. There would be certain algorithms that you need to capture for essentially in a typical insurance domain project, you have to capture the requirement for a particular algorithm which gives you the final quotation. So basis on whatever factors you are picking up for that particular insurer or person who is coming to you for purchase of insurance policy, there is a algorithm sitting under that particular system. So you might have observed that an insurance policy for 1 year or for a person who is in the age bracket of 25 to 30 years is much cheaper for the same policy in the age bracket of 35 to 40. As the age increases, the insurance premium increases. Why this happens? Because of this algorithm. So algorithm take care of all those factors. Like if the age a person is aging, the risk of his encountering with those particular risk mentioned in his policy is more, or the probability is more. So the premium should be kept high. So that is how the business works for insurance domain requirements or insurance domain project. Now next category of requirement is your user interface requirement, your UI requirement, like which captures the detail of software user interface into written document. So whenever you are creating a wireframe or a particular prototype for a particular system or a particular screen design, so those kind of requirement would go under your user interface requirement. Essentially your data dictionary could be considered as a part of your user requirement documents. Once you build up a particular screen, after that you would be modeling that particular screen to a set of database table. After you have mapped it to a set of database table, you would be creating a data dictionary. So those kind of requirements are part of your user interface or UI requirement. So these were the most used 11 categories of requirements that are available when you are working or initiating your requirement elicitation session. Now, before we move into phases and requirement elicitation, do anyone have any query? Okay. So essentially, when we are dealing with requirement elicitation, there are 4 phases. First is your requirement discovery, then is your requirement classification and organization, then requirement prioritization and negotiation, and final stage is your requirement specification. So requirement discovery is like the phase wherein you are initiating your chat session or interview session or any XYZ session with different stakeholders, where you tend to discover what is the need and what should be the set of requirement in and around that particular need. Here you understand the stakeholder perspective, you explore some realistic scenario in and around that particular business context and tend to discover the requirement. Now, you could also leverage some existing documentation within your current organization by doing some document analysis in the discovery phase, which would help you get a concrete context behind what is the demand of the business or what the business is expecting. So at this phase, requirement discovery phase, you only discuss the requirement. You don't go about writing the requirement. excuse me. So interview technique and use cases and scenarios are the most common technique that you would be using during your interview technique. Now these use cases would be at a very high level. At a later point of time, when you would be creating the concrete system requirement specification document, there is when you would create these use cases in full-fledged way. Here you would be only capturing the high level use cases. Like I said, interview technique would be having close-ended question and open-ended question. So close-ended question is like you would be having a predefined set of questions, like a checklist kind of thing that you would be asking. An open-ended question would be like you could ask any question, but it has to be in the context of the project or the business case that you are discussing. The next phase is your requirement classification and organization. Now, after you have done with your requirement discovery phase, you go about classifying the requirement. Like I explained you the 11 categories of requirement. You classify the requirement based on the categories of the requirement. After that, you organize the requirement. Organization as in which is the requirement that is the base of that particular functionality. After that, what is the next set of requirement you would be taking up? You have to organize those requirements. After you have done that phase, the next phase is your requirement prioritization and negotiation. So this is the phase wherein you sit with the business stakeholder and tend to prioritize the requirement. Like we have this 1,000 set of requirements gathered. Now you tell us what should be the priority. Now when you are setting a priority, you cannot go in a zone wherein you just um, what I would say collect their feedback. You should also have your point of view in front of them. So that is essentially termed as negotiation. If they say yes, this is high priority, you should ask them question. Why this is high priority? What is the reason behind why you have categorized this requirement as high priority? You should negotiate it so that it goes easy for the development team or the team who would be implementing those requirements. See how business work is like out of 1,000 requirement, they would say 700 are high priority requirement, but you cannot deliver 700 requirement in one go. You have to negotiate it. So as a business analyst, you have to use your negotiation skills over there when you are prioritizing the requirement. Next, you have requirement specification. Now that all the requirements you have, the 1,000 list of requirements through the elicitation phase, now you go about specifying those requirements. Specifying as in detailing out those requirements in the form of a system requirement specification document. So after this phase, during this phase, you work on your system requirement specification, and after the phase is over, your final deliverable or the artifact that you produce in front of the business is your system requirement specification document. Now, okay, any
Hello?
questions so far in the 4 phases?
Yeah, so while we are classifying, organizing, prioritizing, and detailing the requirement, where does the requirement validation come in this between?
So requirement validation would come in when you are doing requirement gathering part. So remember I told you requirements are still in unconfirmed state. Once you start with requirement gathering phase, when you send your requirements to your business sign off, at that point of time when they approve the requirement, you have to validate the requirement with this documents which you have created in requirement elicitation phase, like the unconfirmed state and the confirmed state. How much deviation is there?
Okay.
Okay, now coming to the requirements writing approaches. So there are certain writing approaches when you go about writing the requirement. One approach is this way, wherein you do a notation around a requirement like natural language, structured natural language, design description language, graphical notation, mathematical specification. So whenever you are writing algorithm specific requirement, you would be using mathematical specification. If there are certain requirement which would need some charts or graphs or some annotation or UML kind of stuff, you would be using graphical notation. Then natural language requirements are simply straightforward sentences. Then you would be having structured natural language requirement, like I told you, requirement attributes and properties. So those are nothing but structured way of gathering the requirement or writing the requirement. And then we have some design description languages. So if you want to include some pseudocode in your particular requirement, then in that case you could go about writing the requirement in design description languages. So essentially your natural language specification requirement looks like this. For example, a requirement can be, the blueprint for natural language specification is like, a actor shall do something by how, explain how the user can trigger this feature in order to do so that by explain the benefit of the or the objects of this requirement. So you focus on who is the actor, how this thing is triggered, this feature is triggered, and what is the reason behind triggering this particular feature. So for example, if we see a requirement, a system shall allow the user to register by entering their username and password in order to get an access to the system. So in this case, the actor is system. How is like the user to register by entering their username and password. So a system should allow a user to register, but how? By entering their username and password. And why? In order to get access to the system. Access to the system is something they are looking for after this requirement is developed. So in this way, you could write the requirement in natural language specification. So in some cases, the system would be an actor. In some cases, the user would be an actor, like your end user, vendor, supplier. So it's up to you, or it's up to your elicitation results, who is the actor you decide for that particular requirement you are writing. The other part of requirement is like the other way of requirement is like structured language specification, how you structure your requirement. So you first structure your requirement like number, title, description, input, processing, output, precondition, postcondition. Essentially you are attributing your requirements. After that you write the properties of the requirement, like how the requirement should be written. Like now this is the heading of the requirement. Basis on the attributes you have defined, these parameter or the properties of the requirements would change. So this is another way of structuring your requirement when you are writing. Next we see software requirement specification. Now whenever you are doing elicitation of the requirements, the obvious outcome is your software requirement specification. So software requirement specification is a subset of your BRD, business requirement documentation. They are also called as your functional specification document in regular business terms. So essentially there are certain characteristics of software requirement specification. Now what are those characteristics that you need to take into consideration before writing a software requirement specification? So those characteristics are, the requirement has to be complete in nature. If you write a statement like, for a particular system, in case of an error, the system must exit gracefully. Now what is gracefully? This is not a complete requirement. It doesn't define the purpose of the requirement. Instead, you could write a complete requirement as, in case of an error, the system must show an error page to the users with the following message: oops, we have encountered some error and working on it. In this file, you could go to the home page and try other option. So in this context, you have a detailed requirement around, if an error occurs to an system, what should be printed on the error page. Firstly, if an error occurs, an error page would come and would be displayed to the user. Next, what should be there in the error page? So it's a complete requirement compared to the incomplete requirement like exit gracefully. So you have to avoid this ambiguous term when you are writing a SRS, software requirement specification. The next characteristics is consistent. Now you closely examine these two statements. Okay, The first requirement says that the invoices will be generated and sent automatically based on the milestone achieved with a copy of the account department. And the second requirement says the account department will generate the invoice based on milestone achieved and will send it to the customer. Now both of these requirements are in the same system requirement specification, and ultimately they mean the same thing, but the way they are framed, that is different. So instead of having two requirements phrased in two different contexts, ultimately giving the same outcome, it's better to have only one requirement which should be included in the SRS instead of both. So you have to avoid those inconsistent or duplicate requirements when you are preparing a system requirement specification. Now third characteristics is feasibility of the requirement. So whenever you are writing a requirement like the developed software must be reliable and should not crash. Now what is reliable in this context? Reliable doesn't have any meaning. Now the developed system must be free of defects. Do you think any system would be free of defects in today's landscape? No. These are infeasible requirements. This cannot be developed. You cannot develop a system under these circumstances. So there is no software which is free of defects. Instead, both of these requirements are not eligible to be part of system requirement specification. You never write such statement or infeasible requirement in a system requirement specification. Next characteristics is unambiguous. So an ambiguous requirement would be like all the screen in the system must load quickly. Now what is quickly? That is an ambiguous statement. So you have to write unambiguous requirement like all the screen in the system must load within 8 seconds. So this is more comprehensible and more easy to understand from a user context. So always write requirement basis on something that is measurable and quantifiable. You cannot write these vague statements whenever you are drafting a SRS. Next, the requirement should be testable. So untestable requirement is like the system must be user friendly. Now what is user friendly? It makes no sense to me. So you could write unambiguous requirement as the user interface should be menu driven on the top of the website along with the site index. So a tooltip for all the text boxes must be provided. So here you are capturing all the details around the navigation that the user would do when he would be navigating through a particular system. User friendly doesn't suffice the purpose. So you have to write the requirement in a testable manner as well. Next is the requirement should be modifiable. Modifiable as in if there is a need to change that particular requirement, you should be able to modify that requirement rather than writing a new requirement altogether. So you have to write the requirement in such a context that it should be modifiable. For example, in our very first example, here we took a case wherein we are getting an error. Now, if the user comes today and he says our support email address has changed, instead of support, you have to write helpdesk as abc.com. So here the requirement is modifying. So you are only changing support to helpdesk, not the entire requirement. So that is what the last characteristics of system requirement specification says, that it has to be modifiable. Any questions, anyone? Okay. Now we see a software requirement specification document has essentially these contents. Like there would be a purpose, there would be some document conventions, there would be the intended audience and reading suggestion, the project scope, the reference, the overall description, the product perspective, the operating environment, design and implementation constraint, assumption and dependencies, system features, external interface requirement, UI, hardware, software interfaces, other non-functional requirement, performance, safety, and security. This is a typical skeleton of a software requirement specification document. Now we'll go through a software requirement specification document that I have. Okay, any questions, anyone so far? Hello.
No.
Okay, so this is how your software requirement specification document looks like. So we essentially have the software requirement specification. It would always have a version associated to it. So the changes that you are making would essentially give to a newer version of your software requirement specification. Same case goes to your BRD, business requirement document, or whatever requirement document you are creating. You have to version out those requirement documents or the business articles. Then you have to mention your project name, who is the creator of that particular document, who is the owner of that document, and what is the purpose of its submission, whether it's a submission submitted in partial fulfillment of the requirements or complete fulfillment of the requirement. You have to specify it, because there are cases when you tend to have multiple software requirement documents in the context of a particular system. If the system is too large, you cannot have one software requirement specification. You would be having multiple SRS documents derived out of your BRD. So you have to specify whether it's a partial SRS or it's a full SRS of the entire system. Then you have these table of contents, like purpose. You would be having what's the purpose of this particular requirement document, like what this is intending to do, what is the system all about. So here you have to put more emphasis on the system rather than business. So BRD would put more emphasis on business, but here the purpose has to be building up of a system in and around the business context. So your introduction would be more from a perspective of a system. The scope would again more from the perspective of a system rather than what is the business flows or business process. Those all things would go into BRD document. Here you have to describe the system scope. Then if you are using any glossary, then you have to specify it over here, because generally what people do, the business analysts, they don't write the same sentence, same statements again and again. So rather they form glossaries list over there. So if you are using some glossary, then you have to highlight it over here so that the business user or the approver gets an understanding of what are these glossaries. Then if you have referred some thing in public domain, then you have to mention it over here. What is your source of reference? After that, you have to give an overview of the document. Like if it is a partial SRS, you have to specify what is the scope or what are the typical features that you have taken into consideration in this particular document. If it's a full system requirement specification, then you have to specify what the system is all about, what are the benefit the customer is intending to this particular system. You have to highlight it, how this document addresses the need of the system. You have to give that document overview. After that, you have to give the overall description, like what are the system. You could probably include some of the use cases in terms of designing of your system, like how the system would behave at a very high level. You could give an overall description of the particular system. After that, you go on writing your functional requirements, and if there are certain associated use cases, you go on writing the use cases to that particular requirement. Like this is a particular use case for alumni homepage, then this is a use case for alumni survey. Similarly, depending on how many number of screens you have to create the use cases, how the system would be behaving in a particular context. You have to create those use cases. Along with that, you have to highlight the steps that a user would perform when a use case needs to be executed. For example, if I say alumni homepage screen, so the alumni would select the fill out the survey link. The departmental survey returns the survey form. The alumni fills in the form. The alumni clicks submit. The departmental server retains information. So you have to essentially outline what this particular use case is doing through the steps. You have to first describe the use case and what are the steps that would be done in that particular system. You have to detail it out, because it's a detailed version of your requirement gathering rather than high level version in case of BRD, your business requirement document. After you have done these things, depending on the number of features your application is having, you have to gather the non-functional requirement in similar fashion. Once you have gathered the functional requirement, you would be gathering the non-functional requirement. So in non-functional requirement, you have to highlight the infrastructure related requirement like server availability, reliability, scalability, and all those things. After you have done that, you have to write the interface related requirement. If there are external interfaces, then you have to specify it over here. Like the payment example I gave you, PayPal, Visa, MasterCard, you have to highlight it over here if there are any external interface associated with this particular system. After that, you go on detailing out the use cases for the functional requirement, whatever your use cases are there in this format. So use cases has certain format. You could follow this use case format and outline your requirement. Like for access alumni homepage, priority is essential, trigger is menu selection, precondition is this, basic path is this, alternate path is this, post condition is this, exception path is this. If there are any references, then you have to give it. Now, use cases and UML is something that I am going to cover in one particular exclusive session, wherein I would get into detail of it, how this thing are written, how you conclude the precondition, basic path, alternate path, and post condition, exceptional path, basis on the particular business case. So as of now, to summarize, they all would be part of this functional requirements when you are writing a software requirement specification. After that, the section would be like non-functional requirement, if there are any. If your system is having a database uh, uh, behind it, of course it would have. You have to outline the database attributes, the types, and attribute size. So when I would be covering the SQL part of this course, I would be covering these things. Like what are these? What are the typical operations that you perform in a particular database? So as of now, this would be part of your software requirement specification. After that, if there are some mandatory fields, you have to highlight those things. And later point of time, if you want to write something that what are the possible options the system would be having after the system has been completed, I mean how the system would evolve to your newer version, then you could write those proposed statements in this section. And at the end, you would be having the indexing part, whatever you have written and what page number it has. So it's a very generic case study that is present in this particular document. You could refer this case study and come up with your own software requirement specification. Now that it has use cases and your UML diagrams associated to it and some database elements to it, I don't expect this document to be completed by next week. So as and when we would be covering a session, like we covered UML, you go on including UML. Like I covered use cases, you go on including use cases. And similarly, if I go on covering the user interface or wireframes, you go on including wireframes. Same case for your database tables as well. So it has to be delivered towards the end of our this particular program. It hasn't to be delivered by next week, but you have to start working on this document.
Hello?
Yeah.
So, like BA creates this SRS document. So, how much time it's being given to BA to create this document?
The entire
information.
analysis phase, depending on the nature of the project, depending on the complexity of the projects, ideally it's the 2 to 3 months of time, but it may increase depending on the complexity and nature of the project.
Okay, and after the document is completed, we have to submit to whom, like project manager or
Business users.
business users? Okay, thank you.
Okay. So this would be your assignment for today through this session, which you have to start working on, but it hasn't to be submitted by next week because it's an ongoing activity that needs to be done, because our SQL session, wireframing session, and your UML use cases session are still pending. So after I cover those sessions, you have to go on populating this document and have to submit this towards the end. But start working on it, start thinking on it. So for your reference, I have also uploaded a template wherein all the necessary justification is given over there, what needs to be populated under what. Just go through this template and start populating them. It's available in that access area which I have given you. Okay, so are BRD and SRS same? No, SRS is a subset of BRD. So what are the modeling techniques that are needed by a business analyst to prepare an SRS? You would be having UI modeling, wherein you would be creating your wireframes or your mockup screen. Then you would be having use case modeling, like how the system would be modeled from a user context or from an actor context. Then you would be having a process modeling. If there are some business process flows, then you have to highlight those process flows as well. And then there are database modeling, like how your UI elements would be mapped to database element. Like if you are entering a name, how it is saved in a database. So that would be taken care of by database modeling part. So essentially, in order to create an SRS, we would be needing essentially these 4 things. There may be additional thing as well. Now, what are the underlying techniques that you would be needing to perform a requirement elicitation? So these are the techniques that would be needed when you are doing a requirement elicitation. So very first technique is your brainstorming. Then there is document analysis, focus group, interface analysis, interviews, observation, prototyping, requirements workshop, and survey and questionnaire. So out of these, some of the techniques we have already covered in our yesterday's session. So today we are going to cover the next 5 techniques. So the very first technique is your document analysis. So whenever you are starting your requirement analysis activity in a typical project, you need to go through a certain set of documents. So those document review is termed as your document analysis. So document analysis has essentially 3 stages, like the preparation stage, the review stage, and the wrap-up stage. So what happens in preparation stage? It essentially, here in this stage, we identify what are the relevant documents that we would be needing in terms of doing the requirement elicitation. So for example, you want to conduct an interview with a business stakeholder. So you have to certainly prepare yourself. In order to prepare yourself, you have to go through a set of documents. So you have to identify which are the right documents that would give you the relevant information so that you can ask suitable questions to the business people. So in the preparation stage, you would identify which are the relevant documents that you would be taking up for your document analysis. The next stage is review stage, wherein you would be doing a thorough study of that particular document. Now this document could be a project based document, which are like archived document of a project that has been already completed in a similar line within an organization. This could be your research related document which you are searching in the public domain. This could be any XYZ document which would give you necessary information around preparation of your interview with the business stakeholder. So that is your review stage, wherein whatever document you have identified in preparation stage, you would go about reviewing those documents. After that, it is followed by your wrap-up stage. So here, whatever notes you have taken out of these 2 stages, you would pick up those notes and start organizing requirements or meeting with the business stakeholder. Like what are the necessary step of questions that you would be asking basis on the document you have reviewed. Now there are certain advantages of document analysis, like they can come in useful when the stakeholder is unavailable or no longer within the organization. So essentially, it's a very valid scenario. If you are intending to consider a scenario wherein you join late in a particular project. In that particular project, you see a document which is created by some XYZ person, and you have some queries around those documents, but that person is no longer available in the organization. So what you would do, you have to thoroughly go through that document, and if there are open questions, then you can ask those questions in interview session to the other accountable person who has taken over the accountability from the person who has left the organization. So that's an advantage. After that, it ensures that the analyst does not start from a blank page. So whenever we are working as a business analyst, we need some concrete, what I would say, elements to start with. We cannot start blank and go unprepared to an interview session or a focus group session or a chat session. We should have some base around initiating a conversation. So this document analysis gives us that particular concrete base. Like it gives us some proof or some understanding about what should be asked in the session which is conducted for interview. After that, it acts as a means of cross-checking requirement with other sources. So if you would like to cross-check the requirement that you would like to ask to the business and see whether that or similar kind of requirement has been already be delivered in some past projects, then document analysis can help. Now, disadvantages would be document analysis is limited to the as is situation. So it doesn't contribute to the to be situation. So there are essentially two things, as is and to be in business analysis. As is like what the system is current, and to be is like after the change, after the development effort, how the system would behave like. So document analysis typically contributes to the as is part, not the to be part. After you have analyzed the document, after you have came up with necessary set of recommendation, you would work towards the to be part of the particular system. Now it usually needs to be updated to reflect correct circumstances. Now this is an important pointer. Now in this particular statement, we have seen the person has left the organization, and the person who has taken accountability from him may choose not to update the requirement document or keep the requirement document updated, SRS document. So in SRS or any XYZ document for that matter. So what happens in that particular case is like after a certain point of time, maybe after 6 months or another 9 months, we tend to miss out certain requirements which are not documented in that particular document. So this document analysis helps you understand what is documented in that particular document and how the system is behaving currently and why there is a deviation. That question you could go ahead and ask to the business user when you are in a interview session with a particular business people. Now it is of course time consuming. You have to sit through and go through all the pages that are there in documentation. You have to understand each and every element within that documents which you are analyzing. So these are essentially list of documents which you would be analyzing, part of document analysis, like your business process documentation, your functional specs, your BR documents, your organizational structure, benchmarking studies, company memos, product reviews, contracts, customer suggestion, anything that could give you a base or give you a question that could be asked in the requirement gathering session or requirement elicitation session. Now next technique is your observation technique. Now observation technique essentially has two components associated to it. One is your passive way of observing people, and then there is an active way of observing people. So passive way, I have already explained you in our previous session that a business analyst would travel to the customer place. He would sit behind the person and he would just observe what that person is doing in that particular system. And after that, he would collect some notes and he would ask the questions in the relevant session. Now, what is an active and visible state then? So active and visible state is like the analyst can interrupt the worker to ask questions during the observation. Again, it's an observation, but this time he would ask questions to that particular person who is operating that particular system. So in both the cases, observation is the base, but in the first case, he won't ask question, he would silently observe him, but in the second case, he would ask him certain questions. Now, third category of technique is your requirement workshop. Now, this is essentially referred to as a chat session as well. Now, in this particular workshop, you could ask any open-ended question or close-ended question to your participants. Now, there is no ground rule such like focus group session that it has to be having participants of similar background or similar nature. In requirement workshop, anyone can participate. It could be a developer, it could be a tester, it could be a solution architecture, architect or any XYZ person. Together, they would give their um, agreement towards a particular requirement. You should be able to collect relevant information from the stakeholder, and you should elicit requirement within a shortened period of time. So essentially what happens in a typical business case, business scenario is like, uh, you speak to a technical user, his perspective of requirement is different. You speak to a business user, his perspective of requirement is different for a same set of features. Now, what is the possible solution? The possible solution is requirement workshop. Bring these two categories of people together and ask the question and gain an agreement from the perspective they are outlining, and that would be your final requirement. If you see there are clash in the perception, the ideal option is requirement workshop. Bring all of those people together and start asking and prioritizing those requirements and gain an agreement towards the final conclusion that whose approach is the best or whose perception is relevant and feasible in terms of creating the requirement. Next technique is your survey questionnaire, wherein you need direct or specific responses. So essentially in a domain wherein we have massive information and we want to gather, or your stakeholder do not have that much time to come to an interview or to a meeting, you tend to adopt this technique, that is survey questionnaire. Here you have to give them some straightforward question, possibly a yes no like of question, and they would go on responding it. Basis on that, you derive your conclusion for that particular requirement. So typically it happens in a context wherein you are improvising the system or you are improving the user experience of the system. For example, there is a particular website like your what I would say, a Facebook kind of website. So Facebook creates a survey questionnaire that we are in the process of developing these 4 features. So they would send out this questionnaire about these 4 features to different user, and they would ask them which feature is most important to you, rate on the scale of 1 to 5. So there would be these 4 features and the user would go on rating them basis on their need, that according to them this is the most important feature they would like to see in next version upgrade of Facebook. So all the results collected via survey and questionnaire are then collectively summarized, analyzed, and whichever gets the highest ranking, that feature would come in the very next version. So in those scenario, you could use survey questionnaire when you have multiple users, massive users to gather the information, or in a case wherein your business stakeholder is not available for any XYZ reason, he could respond to a survey question. Now, these are some of the key consideration that you need to take. The very important consideration is questionnaire should not be longer, more than 10 minutes. Whatever you have to ask, whatever questions that you have to frame, whether it's 5 question or 10 question, it shouldn't take more than 10 minutes. That is the most important part that you need to keep in consideration when you are drafting a survey questionnaire. Now, these are some of the advantages, like questionnaires can be completed at the convenience of the respondent. So you, of course, can set a timeline, but you need to ensure that that is responded within a specific period of time. Because if a business user is not available and he is unable to come to an interview, then you should give an expiration to that particular form you are sending, that this particular form would expire within 48 hours, so that he gets a notification that okay, within 48 hours I need to complete this survey. So you can set certain expiration to your survey questionnaire forms as well. Then there are this is relatively inexpensive. Why it is inexpensive? Because it's just a form that you are sending, and through this form you are getting the response. There is no communication channel involved like your TCON, VCON or XYZ channel. It's direct end-to-end exchange of information via this form, and creation of form doesn't take that much time or that much effort. So it's an inexpensive way of gathering the information. Then you there may be a case that a end user want to give feedback to a particular system, but he do not want to reveal his name. So that anonymity is also taken care of by survey question. you don't ask their names. Directly send the possible set of questions. So that would suffice the purpose of anonymity. Then responses can be tabulated and expressed in a format that is easy to analyze. Once you have all the information from various stakeholders, you could tabulate that particular information and put it in a format which is easy to analyze, especially when you are intending to rank the survey questionnaires, like which is the most relevant, which is the least relevant. And then there are stakeholder disadvantages, like there is no guarantee that the stakeholder will provide all the necessary information. So there may be a case like that. So this case essentially happens in a case wherein instead of questionnaire, you include some subjective question in it, like what do you feel about this particular system, what is the feature that you dislike in this particular system, and why. Avoid those kind of question. Those kind of question would take more than 10 minutes of time. It should be simple questions with a possible answers like yes, no, or an answer on a scale of 1 to 5 or 1 to 10. Include questions like those. Then the use of questionnaire does not offer immediate opportunities to ask follow-up question and clarity. So you cannot immediately go back to the end user after they have submitted the questionnaire, because you have to wait till the expiration period. Once the form is expired to all the users, then only you could tabulate and come up with your analysis, and then you could ask the follow-up question. So the wait period is essentially 3 days to 1 week or 15 days. You cannot ask in between follow-up question. So that is a disadvantage. And there is no opportunity to study and decipher the body language of respondent, since it's not a face-to-face way of interacting with the user. So that is an challenge over here. Like what is the actual emotional behavior of the user when they are responding to this particular question, since it's not a face-to-face interaction. Now the final technique is interface analysis. So interface analysis is like when your system is interacting with other system, like your Visa card or PayPal system. What are the typical consideration you have to consider when your system is interacting to other? Like if your system is sending information in XML and it is receiving information in JSON format, how do you do the data conversion in between? Those kind of uh, analysis needs to be done when you are dealing with interface analysis. So this would be supported with multiple other artifacts like that would come from process modeling and use case modeling as well. So interface analysis would essentially deal with the system which is interacting with the external system. So to summarize, these all things we covered today. Any questions, anyone? Yeah, yeah, please go on with the question. Okay, so it again depends on the need. So what is the need essentially? So if you consider this particular techniques like interface analysis, in today's landscape, all of the projects would be having interfaces to deal with. You could use interface analysis in almost every project. Now coming to surveys and questionnaire, it essentially deals with the project which are more of data analysis in nature. So if your project is more from a data modeling perspective or more from a perspective of data analysis, you could use survey and questionnaire technique during requirement elicitation. Now coming to requirement workshop, it is used in all projects. Every projects would be using requirement workshop irrespective of a new development, or it's a system upgrade, or it's a maintenance project. Observation technique, again, it's a need to need basis. You can use it if you feel like, or you may eliminate it. Same case goes to document analysis. If the project is very new in nature, you could go by document analysis. And for that matter, if you are working in a maintenance project and you have recently joined that particular project, then you have to go through a set of documents for your initial understanding. So document analysis was also used in all category of projects. So there isn't any hard and fast rule which technique to use when. Whenever you feel like this is a relevant technique, go about using it. Because if you consider the BABOK, that is Business Analysis Body of Knowledge, prescribed by IIBA, so they do not prescribe that you have to use this set of technique in elicitation. They say you are free to use any technique, but analyze the need first. That's the reason why I started my session with needs.
So we can use multiple.
Yes, absolutely. You have to use multiple requirement gathering techniques. Okay, any other questions? Okay, so this was part one of elicitation session. This was the traditional approach. In our Tuesday's session, that would be the part two of elicitation session, wherein I would be covering agile approach, wherein I would explain you what are features, what are epics, how to write user stories, what are acceptance criteria, how to write definition of done. In user story, what are the 10 different category of user stories in which you could write the requirement? Like we saw 10 different categories of requirement. There are 10 different ways you could write a particular user story. So we would learn about those categorization. What should be the format of epic when you are writing it? What should be the format of feature when you are writing it? What should be the format of acceptance criteria when you are writing it? Then we would also cover some of the advanced aspect of agile, like how to link one user story to another. Then how to maintain the particular user story. What is the difference between user stories, task, bugs in a particular requirement management tool? We would learn about those criteria. So that is the agile approach, and this is your traditional approach. So people who have opted for writing the requirements in traditional approach, they can go about writing the system requirement specification, the sample template, and the template that you need to edit. They are already available in that access area. And for the people who have opted for writing the requirements in an agile approach, they could start writing their requirement only after I have completed the sixth session. That is your agile approach of requirement elicitation, wherein you would go about defining the feature, epics, and populating the user story.